Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are taking on a truly monumental question, one that really sits at the foundation of faith.
Absolutely. We're talking about the universal history of ritual prayer.
Exactly. And we're doing a deep dive specifically into the Islamic ritual of Allah. We're asking, how does this highly structured ritual connect to the practices of prophets who came long before?
It's a fantastic mission, and it forces us to synthesize a lot of information. We've been looking at classical Sunni and Shia commentaries, modern theology, scriptural analysis.
And the goal is to find the consensus, right?
Yeah.
To trace this lineage of worship.
Yes. What precisely is continuous across time, and what's unique to the final form of Islamic law.
And right from the start, the sources establish a core concept. From an Islamic worldview, ritual prayer is, well, it's not a new invention at all.
Not at all. It's seen as a practice as old as humanity itself, received by every prophet, starting right with Adam.
An unbroken, universal chain of worship.
Exactly. This is the whole concept of primordial worship. The very first instruction, reinforced over and over. And that sets the stage for our first major finding, that the command to pray, to perform Allah, was absolutely universal.
Okay, so let's unpack this. We're saying scripture shows actual evidence of these physical actions being commanded millennia ago. What did the sources show on that?
They showed direct commands right there in the prophetic narrative. You can look at the story of Abraham purifying the Kaaba with his son Ismail. They were explicitly told to prepare that sacred house for those who would come and stand and bow and prostrate.
And this is where it gets really interesting. Standing, bowing, prostrating, qiyam, ruku, sujud, those are the essential non-negotiable pillars of law today.
Right, so the sources are saying the physical language of worship was the same, even for Abraham.
It's powerful evidence of that continuity.
It is. And moving forward in the timeline, the sources confirm the command was just as explicit for Musa, for Moses. The Quran says, "Indeed I am Allah, so worship me and establish prayer for my remembrance."
So that's not a suggestion. It's an unequivocal command for a specific ongoing worship.
It is. And that timeline extends all the way to Isa, to Jesus.
Right, the sources cite the verse where he says, "God has enjoined upon me prayer and zakah as long as I live."
So this command for ritual, prayer, and charity, it really does run like a golden thread through the entire prophetic chain.
Which leads to a really important theological consensus, doesn't it?
It does. It's critical in both Sunni and Shia scholarship. The idea that any major prophet might not have prayed is considered, well, impossible.
Because they're seen as obedient and sinless, May.
Exactly. So if prayer, in whatever form was revealed for their era, was obligatory, they performed it flawlessly.
So the difference isn't in the fact of worship, but only in the detailed form of that ritual.
That's the key distinction.
That's a crucial insight for you, the listener, because it clarifies the scope. We're not saying there was some kind of pre-Islamic fiqh manual, a rule book detailing everything.
No, not at all. But we are confirming the spiritual mandate and the core physical actions.
And those physical actions are historically rooted.
Precisely. Scholars point to, for instance, Jewish sources, which document standing, bowing, and prostration as established parts of worship.
Like the accounts of Daniel praying 3 times a day.
Right. And from an Islamic perspective, this historical trace, this residue of bowing and prostration, is seen as the tangible evidence of that universal primordial pattern.
So the fact of prayer is continuous. The core gestures are commanded. Now let's make that pivot for the fact of prayer to the form. This is where the Shari, the divine law, comes in.
And this brings us to what we could call the principle of difference. The core agreement across all the scholarly sources is this: the obligation to pray is universal. It's eternal.
But the Shari, this specific legal framework for the how, when, and how many, that can differ.
It can, and it did. The earlier prophets prayed, but in ways that were, appropriate to their own Shari.
So the same spiritual core humility, glorification, but with a different expression.
It's like having the same operating system kernel, but a different user interface for each version.
That's a great analogy.
The kernel is those core gestures, standing, bowing, prostration. They embody that humility.
But the specific combinations, like 2 cycles for the morning prayer, 4 for the afternoon.
Right. Those precise numerical formulas, they're unique to the final perfected Shari that came with Prophet Muhammad.
Which naturally raises the question of frequency. Did the sources say if Abraham or Moses prayed 5 times a day?
The sources are very clear on this. We just don't have a definitive scriptural account for the previous prophets.
And why is that?
Because the number of worship acts is part of what's called taklif. It's the divine legislation, the burden of obligation, and it's tailored to each community.
And that can change.
It's permitted to change across different prophetic eras. It depends on the capacity and the needs of that community.
So the 5 daily prayers are a specific prescription,
Yeah.
tailored for the Ummah of Muhammad.
Absolutely. The historical narrative of the Miraj, the night journey, supports this directly.
The story of the prayers being reduced from 50 down to 5.
Exactly. That whole negotiation shows that the legislation is flexible and specifically adapted. It also shows the importance of having fixed times, even if the number changes.
That idea of a schedule for worship seems continuous.
It does. You see clear parallels. Jewish practice commonly has 3 fixed daily services.
Shakwat Mincha Mariv.
Right. And Islamic scholarship sees this as strongly analogous to earlier prophetic laws. The concept of regular scheduled devotion is continuous. The number is the changeable legislation.
Okay, this brings us to a central paradox, one that often confuses people. It tests this boundary between the continuous essence and the unique form. We have to talk about the Miraj.
The night journey, yes.
If the specific 5 daily prayers became fard formally obligatory for Muslims at the Miraj, then what was Prophet Moses, doing praying in his grave during that same journey?
This is where the theology gets intensely interesting. That hadith is absolutely critical. The sources describe the vision of the Prophet Muhammad seeing Musa praying in his grave.
And it's not just a beautiful image, it creates a theological puzzle. How do the scholars synthesize that?
They draw a very crucial distinction. When they say the 5 daily prayers became fard on this ummah at the Miraj,
They mean the specific schedule.
the specific number, timing, and structure. The 5 times a day schedule was formalized as the mandatory obligation for the Muslim community at that moment.
So Musa's prayer wasn't following this new schedule.
Correct. Musa was praying his own prophetic prayer. His action is rooted in the command given directly to him, the one we mentioned earlier, establish prayer for my remembrance.
He's continuing his obedience in the barzakh, the intermediary realm.
Exactly. He's praying the way he was commanded to pray, confirming that, for prophets, prayer isn't just a duty tied to earthly life. It's an eternal act of devotion.
So the Miraj didn't invent prayer. It just finalized the timetable for the final community.
And the vision of Musa praying acts as the theological proof. It confirms the essence of Allah existed long, long before. It's a powerful validation.
It's the ultimate connector. It roots the current practice firmly in that ancient monotheistic lineage, which naturally leads to the next logical question for anyone learning this. If the origin is shared and the core physical acts are primordial, why do current Jewish and Christian practices look so different?
A very important question. Why isn't there an identical ritual across all 3 Abrahamic faiths?
Yeah.
And Islamic theology offers 2 primary interconnected explanations for this. Both deal with the idea of preservation.
The first one is a concept called tarif. What do the sources say that means?
Tarif means alteration or corruption or even just loss over time. The belief is that previous scriptures, and by extension the practices tied to them, were altered.
By who?
By followers, copyists, later authorities over centuries. A ritual is a delicate structure. If the scripture or the memory of the prophet's exact practice is corrupted, the ritual will inevitably change.
It's like data degradation.
That's a perfect way to put it. Human factors cause a drift from the original form.
And the second reason is nask.
Yes, nask, which can be translated as abrogation, or maybe better, completion. Islam presents itself as the final preserved Sharia, as a restoration of that primordial religion, the din al-fiyah that was given to all prophets.
So the argument is that the differences we see today are a result of both human changes and divine updates. And Islam claims to be the final, perfectly preserved version.
The definitive final software update, to use your analogy.
Okay, let's test that theory of remnants and alteration. Let's start with Jewish prayer. Where do we still see that common root?
Well, we see significant similarities. Things that Muslims view as strong remnants of that shared Abrahamic tradition. We already mentioned the fixed daily times, but look at the physical acts.
Standing, the Amida, bowing.
Right, and ritual washing before prayer, often hands and face, which is very similar to watcher.
And critically, the fixed direction of prayer towards Jerusalem.
All these elements together suggest a highly ritualized, formalized structure that survived.
And the sources also point out that full prostration sujud was definitely present in ancient temple worship, even if it's less common today.
Absolutely. The similarities are very strong markers of a shared origin.
Christianity, though, that seems to show a greater divergence.
It does. Early Christians certainly inherited Jewish prayer patterns, fixed hours, bowing.
And Jesus himself prostrated. The Gospels mention it.
Yes, but over the centuries, that practice really diminished in mainstream Christianity.
And why was that? Based on the comparative sources.
The sources suggest a couple of main drivers. First, the loss of the temple and the move away from that kind of centralized, ritualized Semitic worship. And second, the spread of Christianity into the Greco-Roman world. Hellenistic culture, it placed much more emphasis on philosophical discourse, on verbal proclamation.
Shifting the focus away from physical acts of submission like prostration.
Exactly, more towards sermon-centered devotion. The practice adapted, it diversified, and it resulted in much less physical uniformity than the Islamic or the ancient Jewish pattern.
So if we synthesize this entire deep dive, the physical act of submission standing, bowing, prostrating is the universal continuous language of prophetic worship. That mandate never changed.
That is the ultimate conclusion. Allah is seen as the restored, purified form of that universal prophetic mandate, correcting the alterations, the tarif, and finalizing the system of worship, the nask for the Muslim community.
The final, perfectly preserved edition of Adam and Abraham's original prayer.
That's how it's understood.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? Why should you care about the history of Moses' prayer?
For you, this deep dive reveals that when you engage in the ritual prayer, you're not participating in something isolated or new.
You're connecting to something ancient.
You're connecting directly to a continuous tradition extending back through every major figure of faith, to Adam, Ibrahim, Musa, and Asa.
It emphasizes continuity over invention.
Exactly. Your worship becomes part of a legacy that stretches back across millennia.
A connection that is truly profound.
And let's just end with one thought for you to consider. Let's go back to that hadith about the Mi'raj. The vision shows Musa praying in the barzakh, the realm after death.
Right.
The obligations of this life have ended for him. He is free from striving, from the fear of penalty.
He's not praying because he has to.
He's praying because he finds spiritual delight, honor, and continuous benefit in that act. So how should that knowledge reframe your own understanding of prayer? Not merely as an obligation you must perform, but as a continuous, eternal source of spiritual connection that you are honored to access.